Hello again, Dimanari here, back to code review. I made some script resolver that can either take script from an external file or it would just execute this if it is run without any instruction. There is an additional instruction that can just like the entire source code. First argument is always the file. When you call this function, this program, you say CSnek underscore 0.3, which is what I currently named it. It's not the final name, but you call this, then you say your file name. This would execute it. If you do the same thing, but instead add -i, executes file name something, and this print print the post imports of file name something, so that you can see the final code that the program is trying to execute. So the syntax might not look very readable if you don't know what it actually is doing, but it might also look extremely simple. So there are certain reserved words that are set in here, and in the map, in the string map that contains integers, and basically every keyword has its value. Certain keywords have the same value, like label and function, that are basically the same. Those are set, global, val, string, float, int, print, clear, line, input, add, sub, mul, div, loop, if, label, goto, func, call, return, system, execute, and import. Of course, I can add more of those, but those are what currently exist. In it, just set the keywords to like be the keywords, and then just load basic stuff to know what to do, and then debug does certain things. So it executes and then it pause, use system pause. I can do other things, but this is currently just a I don't know how to call it, a development build. I think it's not a final version, and it's not the intended use of this. It's not the intended use here. I can actually remove the pause and just let the programmers, that the coders that use this to put inputs at the end of their function, so that to end the function people would need to input something and then press enter. Alright, there used to be a problem with my input, but I think that it was solved because I added my own scan. It's a scan function I found on I found it online. It's not my own invention, but it is stupendously simple. I wouldn't have written it so cleanly. My execution would probably have been messy. I would have never used p++ equal to char ch. Like, that feels dumb to even try. Yeah, this is not a proper implementation of a scan function, because backspace. The correct way to make this is to do this and make unsigned max buffer size equal buffer size. Then if ch doesn't equal to 9, which is backspace, do this, else buffer size plus, and then if max buffer size is smaller than buffer size, then buffer size is equal to max buffer size. Else instead of doing this, I usually just do this, like setting it to a proper number versus setting it into a character that you set to a proper number. This is just more natural to me. Oh, I'm dumb. Backspace is 8. If it's not backspace, then increase. If it is backspace, then just set the current position. Cause I think this makes it so that if I'm buffer is p, and yeah, it first sets ch to p, and then it increase p to +1. It's sort of my fault that this function is dumb. Like, it's written very well, except it ignores one of the main feature of scanning, which is actually freaking using backspaces. And so you increase the buffer size, and then if you see that the buffer size is overflowing, like the buffer, you're going to the negative because it's bigger than the maximum buffer size. When those are equal and you press backspace, buffer size increase, and then buffer size is bigger than max buffer size. So it would just set it back to being the max buffer size. If it's not, then it means that the buffer needs to move backward once. And after it does this operation, it will set the current value to 0, just like it does here. For consistency's sake, I would just use the same instruction. And I can just do this. No, actually, I should still keep this. Okay. This exit, and yeah. If I remember correctly, I can also probably do return inputs. Let's try this. I never really did. Yeah, I can do return inputs, and it would return the input, which is fun. So this way I can just remove the pause at the end if every program ends with an input, which is, yeah, it is usable. Back to the code. I was in execute, I think. Now back to the execute function. Execute takes the code, the starting line, and it has some extra parameters that are used for later things. It imports the code, which means that it uses all of the import command, and import file name would replace that line with the content of that file. I needed to add the root because there are some complication with it that requires it to know where the code is located relative to the current position of the program, because it's not always running at the same position as the code. I'll probably include an example for this. After it imports the code, it put it in a string stream so it can separate all the line. Then the external variables are added to the local variables. Those external variables are variables that are passed into those local variables with a certain function, and set a local variable named return. It is used for returning variables. It's not that hard. After making the return variable, it labels all of the functions, so it knows where those functions are. Then it initializes the return boolean, the underscore return, that is used to tell the function when and where it needs to stop. And then from the starting line, it runs each line of the code. Right now, I remember the code is passed in the run line for times where you need to call a function, because calling a function is basically just executing from a certain starting line and then returning the return value when the function is returning. So that's basically it. The run line just does certain separation to the line of code that is passed to it in order to determine what this line of code is supposed to do. If it's one of the basic keywords, then it would be part of this functions map, and the function ID would be the integer that is linked with the string. So basically a.first is a string, and if it's equal to the tag, to tag 0, which is basically the part of the code that is before spacebar, here, split 1, then the function ID is equal to the integer that is linked, which is a.second. And then it sets the found to true, and if it did find something, then it breaks. And then if it did find it, then it will run it with the function ID and the rest of the line, because it's split 1. So split it to the string of code up to the spacebar and the string from the spacebar. If there is no spacebar, then the second string would still exist and it would be empty. then G-code, int locals, and return. Int locals is just all of the local variables, but it runs them as a reference through the entire function, basically. Whenever it calls run line or run me or everything else, it runs the int locals as a reference. Also with underscore return. Underscore return is also passed as a reference. If it's not a keyword, then it's probably a variable that needs to return. So for every variable in the local variable, it does the tags val. Tags val is used for when there is something like a var.subdata. So if there is a dot, then it's looking for something there. A.first equal tags val 0. Then if something like this, so it found it, and then if there is something in tags val and the first character in tags val 1 is end, then it would try to run it as a line. Of course, the substring, without it would remove this end from the start and would run it as a line, meaning that something like val dot end index would look into the variable index, and then it would treat it as if it's val dot the value of index. That would be, I don't know, something. If index has something, it would use something. Index can also be a floating point and an integer, and it would just convert this to a string. So if index is for instance 2, then it would treat it as val dot 2, but it's not really 2, it's like a string 2. This would let you make arrays and other things using this system. So if not, then it would just it would be return val a.second.holder. Basically, a.second is the extended var that is linked to a inside the int locals, and then inside its holder look for the string, because it's string and dot value string, but the string result that is from running this line, basically this is run as code, this is as G code, and int locals and underscore return. If tags val is not empty, then it's just a.second.holder tags val 1, because tags val is a string, and otherwise it means that tags val 1 is empty. So return var, ret var, is just a.second, which is the extended var that is linked to a. But in all of those cases, it just sets found to true and return ret var after everything is done. And this is where the function ends if it finds it in the local vars. If it doesn't find it in the local vars, then it just do the same with int globals. for global variables, because maybe you set it as a global variable. It just does the same. And if it didn't find anything, then it checks if the line of code is an integer, then it returns it as an integer, string to int. Yeah, what? It does a string to int, and if it's not, then it's yeah. I fucked up here. I was almost sure that I didn't forget about this, but if it is a float, then it's 0 string to float, empty string, and set it to float. And if it can't see that it's a float or an integer, then it must be a string, and it just drops the entire thing into a string and set it as a string variable. So that was the run line. Yeah, run line. Just basically it defaults for if it's an integer, then put an integer. If it's a float, then put a float. And if it's neither, then put it as a string. After that, there is the run me. Run me takes the function value, and then it takes the remaining code. It splits that code in two ways. First, a split one with space, and second is a split one but with comma. And of course it has a temporal variable and a return variable. Extended pointer and takes currently temp. Oh, I know why, because I need to set it. Yeah, I get the thing as a pointer. I get the reference to that number, and then if it's a set or a convert, then I need, yeah, for instance, a convert to string would set return var to a string. I can also add that like a check if tags1 is empty, then returns basically redvar as underscore string redvar. And yeah, where is int? Int is, yeah, here. If basically just do this. So that if I set nothing here, then it's just converting it into an integer, converting itself into an integer. And if I do say something in tags1, then there is like actually code to run in there to set it into that. Basically, that's the conversions. Okay, that's set. Basically, just set a local variable named tag0 and run this. This can also be, this also just works with empty strings. It would just set it, I think, to an integer, basically. Yeah, because runLine return an integer var that is equal to 0 on empty string or on spacebar. Print custom line basically executes the rest of the code, because run me crops the command the first command, and it just run the specific, like the inside of it. So you can print, basically print custom line would take this as a code and would print it. It can also print the input, I think, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what is the priority there. I think it would first ask you to input something and then it would print it, which would be very fun. So 2 is just a set, and then there is add, just function that adds 2 var parameters, and then returns the addition. Sub same, mul same, div same, loop just does certain code few times, and then 8, the if expression. If is separated by commas, and then it runs the first line and checks the value, the integer value. Oh, it checks the var value and see if it's equal to the default var, which is an integer value of 0. And if that is true, then it would run the second expression. 9, this is label or func. They do nothing. They are used in the label to just make it so that the program runs properly, so you can actually call functions and go to labels. You can also go to function and call labels, because functions and labels are the same thing in here, so it doesn't matter. 10 is 10 go to? I think 10 is go to, yeah, because 9 is label, 10 is go to. So it just looks what the variable that he tried to look into is, and if it's bigger than 0. The thing is, because if this line fails, then it would return an integer value of 0. If it's not, if the integer value is bigger than 0, then it just sets L, which is the line value, into whatever this line of code is returning, and then it returns that value. 11 is call. It's splitting tags 1, which is the rest of the, basically tags 0 is just the name of the function, and then there is a spacebar, and then there is the rest of the string. It separates the rest of the string with commas, put it in tags 1, and then pass those variables as the int extern in the execute. Same as go to, just line this line. Of course, that ret value integer is loaded with L, and after this finish executing, then ret value integer is pushed into L back, so that the function goes back to where it started from, because if you execute this code, then L would change, because you change the starting position, then you execute a few lines of code, so you need to know where to return to. So this is used as something as a temporary storage for where the program was before weird stuff happened. And then it returns what the call returns, the return value of the call. Okay, then there is 12. 12 is basically return. It sets the boolean underscore underline return to true, and then it returns the return value after setting it to what the rest of the line means. Basically runs this line, and this line would return an extended var, and it would load it into this. And this is also why you can't really preload return. It overrides the return value when you run this command, so you can't preload. Okay, and basically this would this run the scan. Where's scan? Scan is not here. I think I talked about scan, but I'm not sure if I deleted the footage. Basically, it's a function that reads, like this was the original one. I just copied it from like I think Stack Overflow or something, and it works, but it's dumb. It's super dumb because there is one thing that it doesn't take into consideration, which is character 8, which is backspace. So I needed to make something that handles backspace, and I did. So I added it into the function and changed it. So it takes a buffer with the buffer size, and it just scan it. Basically, there is not much into it to go into it. It's just reading, but it reads what's it called? I don't know how to, like, I'm not sure how to. Basically, there is an STT. There is an array of char that is array of characters that is in the size of 1000. Char STT 1000. So 1000 characters here, and basically I make a temporary string and initialize set input into whatever that the user write into STT, and then it would set input into that variable and return whatever you set in there. Because when you set a variable, I think I already went over it, but it would return the variable itself. So set input would return input. 15 is just the command that is line that returns a string var with new line in it. Like it used to print a new line and then run the rest of the code, but why? 17 set a global variable. Int global tags 1 is run line tags. Int globals tags 0 is run line tags 1. 18, this is a command called val. When you try to initialize a subval, you have value, and you want value to have value dot sub, then you have value space sub, set it to value dot sub. You can put the actual value in here. Now this sub can also use the end that I showed in here the same way. It's just going to execute it and use it as a string literal. So that's basically what's going on in there, as run line, tags 1, jiggle, and stuff. So, and after all of this, basically it returns the value that you load into here, the end of this convoluted command. And then there is clear, just does this. Then there is system, that just runs the string version of what the line would try to execute. So take the value str.cstr from the output here, and of course there is execute that takes the same thing but use it as the code for executing. And yeah, I forgot one very important thing in here. Yeah. It should be like this, because I need it after it executes this code, I need to return to the same line that I was. And that's basically everything there is to this. That's basically everything there is to it. Like, there's not much, but after all of those things are chained together, I can show print custom line. Print custom line just take this and print it. Like, run this line. Because for one line I must put a boolean value here that can be changed, because reasons. I must have like I must define a boolean here. So it just takes those three variables, it run the line, and then it print this, and the print basically takes an extended var, and if it's an integer, if the value type of this, if this var is an integer, it would print the value integer. If it's float, it would print the value float, and if it's a string, it would print the value of the string. Basically everything here is extremely simple. If it's complicated, then I get wrecked. Loop just takes the first value, that is the amount of times that you want to run the code, and run the rest of the line as the code afterwards. Not very interesting. It's actually not a very usable like command, because you can't really break, and you can't return midway. Oh wait. If a break. Yeah, I have this for a reason.